Some years ago, my partner and I were moving across the country. We stayed one night in St. Louis, and while trying to fall asleep, I began to feel pairs of fingers pressing down on my arms, legs, and head. I was lying on my back, and they were just kind of appearing around my silhouette. By the time it struck me as weird, I couldn't move. Then I felt the pressure increase as I struggled, and it felt like I was being passed headfirst through the wall. That's just sleep paralysis. That's not the weird part. I don't get it often, but I know it well enough. The weird part is that we were traveling with two cats. Our older girl typically sleeps with my partner, curled up under the blanket, and she'll stay there for hours. She's lazy as a rule, but that night something got her attention. I didn't realize she was awake until she pounced on my stomach like she was hunting something. She hadn't pounced on anything like your hand under the blanket in probably 4 years, since she was very young. But she did, and she snapped me out of the paralysis. She then spun around a few times like, "Where did it go?" and then slept on me the rest of the night. She hasn't done either of those things since, and it was the only sleep paralysis instance I've had that felt quite like that. Very weird.
I lived in a very strange apartment where a lot of paranormalities happened. It was in a remote desert city in Israel. In August 2019, we rented an apartment in the center of Eilat with a beautiful panoramic view of the Gulf of Aqaba and the Jordan Mountains. In the beginning, everything was fine. Only later it turned out that our neighbors below were real rowdy alcoholics, yelling day and night. And the most unpleasant thing was that they played the same song, apparently their favorite one, at full volume, 24/7. Let me go to the dance floor to sway drunk, and its specific and loud melody, accompanied by drunken yellings and endless deafening slamming of doors at night, when I was trying to fall asleep, made me just jump up on the bed. Once me and my son went for a walk, and when we returned, to our surprise, we couldn't get into the bathroom, which I really wanted to do, but the door was locked, although there was no key there, and neither before nor after that incident was the door ever locked again. About a quarter of an hour later, we heard a snap and it somehow opened by itself. However, later, even much more stranger events, which occurred in that apartment that made us to rethink our attitude toward the paranormal.
A girl I knew for a few years and was very good. Friends would have passed away in a car accident. A few days later, I have a dream that she's standing in the center of the road and I'm barreling towards her. I run into her, but then she appears in the seat beside me. She forces my head toward her abdomen. Where her stomach would be, there's a large mouth. The teeth are made of broken glass and sharp metal. She keeps saying, "Sis, she." I wake up from the dream and I'm still hearing, "Sish." I look at the foot of my bed and she's standing in my room. She walks through my door and into the hallway. I follow her. She walks down the hallway and vanishes through the front door of the house. I didn't realize at the time, but my dad was on the couch. He asked me if I was okay and asked if the flickering lights are what woke me up. He didn't see her and I never noticed the lights flickering.
For a couple of years in high school, I worked at a donut shop in town. Old-type place. They make the donuts fresh every night. All the workers there would talk about how the place was haunted by a former baker. Big burly guy who eventually just slept in his carpet back. My shift would start right before the restaurant front closed, and before the bakers came in for the night. I'd be alone in the shop. The back where the baking would get done would get absolutely disgusting. Jam and glaze all over the floor to the point before I swept I'd have to scrape the floor with a paint scraper attached to a stick. I, as an extremely lazy person, figured out I could just duct tape cardboard over the really bad areas and make my job way easier, no more jam floors. Well, problem with that was that it basically cut my shifts in half. So I'd spend the time I'd normally be scraping jam of the floor, simply sitting in the front at the counter. Well, one day I'm sitting there stealing time from the suite owners. I see some movement out of the corner of my eye. Looked like someone wearing flannel. Walking from the back to the front of shop, then turning and running. Into the back again. I thought I had just been caught milking the clock by the owner. I never heard any noise of anyone coming in. So I go to the back to check, and who caught me? Face the music, so to speak. No one there. I was so convinced I saw someone. I walked upstairs into the offices which I had never been in before. No one. I later asked what the ghost wore when he was alive. Always flannel.
One time when I was a kid, I was sleeping in my bed, but my dog Coda wanted out really bad. So I opened the door and left it cracked for when he wanted back in. I was laying there trying to fall back asleep, but I noticed the door had opened all the way. Now because the hall light was on and it was distracting. I assumed it was my dog coming back in, so I didn't think anything of it. Now he was a big dog, so you can imagine that when a dog jumps on a bed, It's pretty noticeable. But whatever got on my bed was super quiet and light, and I suddenly felt a cold chill. I was facing the wall and staring with a blank expression because I had no idea what was going on. I knew my dog wasn't in the room because I just knew. I always had my dog sleep with me. After I heard some quiet breathing, I decided to get up and leave. I didn't even look back. I just practically ran out of there, and to the opposite end of the house where my mom's room was. I knocked on her door and told her there was something in my room, and she pulled me inside and locked her door, and we proceeded to fall asleep about 30 minutes later. Later that day, after I woke up, I felt chills as I walked back towards my bedroom. I was afraid that whatever was in there was still there. As I walked back to my room, I passed the living room and noticed that the front door was cracked open. That freaked me out even more. Whatever it was, it never happened again in that house. But I still think about that night, and I try to understand what exactly happened and what it could have been.
A few years ago, my brother would get a call on his cell phone around 2 o'clock, 3 a.m. every night. He would answer, and it was this hellish-sounding noise, like static mixed with screams. He changed his cell number after a month of this, and it stopped. Then after a week or so, it began again. The exact same noise, exact same time. Finally, one day he decided to backdial the call. It was an old man that had no clue what he was talking about. Still, the calls persisted. If he didn't answer, it would call a few more times. No messages were left. He decided to say, screw it, ended his contract with his phone company, switched to a new one, and then got another new number. You guessed it. The screaming static calls continued after a short delay. By this time he was terrified every night. Unsure why this was happening, he backdialed the number again and got a different person. Around this time he lost his job and his phone. The calls stopped, of course. His phone was disconnected now. So one day my mom asks me to listen to this weird message she got on our home phone. It was the static screaming. We showed my brother and he was freaking out. He backdialed the number again and it said the number was disconnected this time. Never heard from it again after that.